Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. I'm your host, Curtis Smith. Thank you for joining us. As we get started tonight, I want to be sure to thank our incredible partners in bringing you this show each Thursday night at 9:30. Thank you to our friends at Shepherd Community Center, Prime 47 Downtown, and Tesco. Tonight, we have the incredible honor of being joined by a very special guest. Suzanne Crouch, the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Indiana, is here with us. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for being here.
Well, you're welcome, Curtis.
This year, you have taken a public stance on the importance of dealing with mental health issues, and that is what we talk about here at Restoring Hope. Why have you taken that public stance? Why is it so important to you?
You know, after the election in November, Governor Holcomb and I sat down and talked about what we wanted to focus on over the next 4 years above and beyond our normal duties and responsibilities. And I told him, for me, it was mental health and addiction. The human cost of this pandemic is huge, and it's going to exponentially grow in years to come. And not just the cost to our families, but the cost to our budgets, whether in the public or the private sector. When I travel Indiana and I talk to school counselors, superintendents, Boy Scout leaders, Girl Scout leaders, anyone that deals with young people, they will say that the amount of depression, anxiety, panic, suicide ideation, acting on suicide, and self-harm is greater than they've ever seen with our young people. And that is the future of Indiana. Before COVID, 1 out of 5 Hoosiers was struggling with mental illness or with addiction. And there's not one of us, probably you or I or anyone that is viewing us today, that doesn't know someone that faces those challenges. And my family's no exception. My mother suffered from depression, my sister committed suicide, my brother's an alcoholic. Those Hoosiers that inherited genes that predispose them to these conditions deserve an opportunity to be successful in life. I know I had a family member say to me once that they got all the bad genes in the family. And I said, you know, it's not the hand we're dealt, it's how we play it that's important. But we've got to give people some good cards to play with. And that is what we need to do. The state and the private sector, we need to come together to figure out how we can provide support and better services for those struggling with mental health and addiction.
Suzanne, you mentioned how personal this is for you, the connections with your mother, your sister, your brother. What did those struggles that they went through and are still going through, what have those meant to you? How have they shaped the way that you view this issue of helping people through mental health struggles?
You know, when you're an individual that doesn't suffer from depression, or you don't have mental health struggles or addiction issues, sometimes I think it's hard for us to understand and comprehend the challenges that those individuals have, because oftentimes they have a lot of things going for them. And so having family members that have struggled, some successfully and some not so successfully with these issues, has given me a greater awareness and understanding of what it is that individuals that are struggling like that are going through. I think it's just made me more sensitive, and it also has driven home for me how important the role of the state can be in terms of providing the right kinds of supports and services to those individuals.
I was going to say, you've been blessed with an incredible opportunity as our Lieutenant Governor, but with that comes incredible responsibility. So how much do you feel that pressure of knowing that you're in a spot, you're in a role where you have the opportunity to change things, to make life better for Hoosiers? How do you strike that balance of responsibly stepping into that, maintaining your role, but helping people in a real and personal way?
I'm just Suzanne Crouch, working hard at the job that I do, and I often forget how important the office of Lieutenant Governor is and how powerful it can be in terms of bringing attention to issues. And I hope to use that office and that influence to bring greater awareness to mental health and to addiction, but also in the relationships that I have with the General Assembly. As Lieutenant Governor, I'm president of the Senate I also am a former state representative and served 8 years in that capacity. So having those relationships within the General Assembly where we can bring people together and provide a greater understanding of those issues, forming those kinds of partnerships that will move the needle for those Hoosiers.
Is that happening? Because as you mentioned, I think for some of us who don't have those struggles firsthand, it is hard to go through life and truly relate to and truly always be aware of the mental health need out there. Do you find that through your relationships, you're moving the needle and making progress and getting other legislators to understand this is a real problem, we need to start addressing it in a new and different way?
Yes, and there's that awareness among the General Assembly. And let me point to 2 examples. The Behavioral Health Commission was created in 2019 by the General Assembly to kind of look at mental health within Indiana and then to make recommendations back to the General Assembly on what changes can be made to make it better. And they're charged with looking at systems, design, and access, with availability, with youth and families, and then also with systems and design. And so they will make recommendations back to the General Assembly, and I think we will see some action there. But also the General Assembly, in this last budget that was passed in April, appropriated $100 million for mental health here in Indiana. And that will go a long way towards starting us on that journey for recovery for those struggling with mental health and addiction. And it is huge. It is making a statement that is important here in Indiana, not just to families and to individuals, but to our workforce. And we also are seeing the private sector step up. The Colts, have taken on Kicking the Stigma as their campaign where they're addressing that issue and putting a spotlight on it. And they recently gave $3.5 million in grants to organizations that are supporting and working with mental illness and addiction here in Indiana. And we are working with Jay Hine and Sagamore Institute to kind of form a public-private partnership and initiative to bring the private sector on board and alongside the state so that together we can address this issue. I'm often reminded of what Helen Keller once said. She said that alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And it's really going to take an all-hands-on-deck approach with the public and the private sector, with faith-based initiatives, with the secular sector of our society. We're all going to have to embrace and work so that we can ensure that every Hoosier has an opportunity to be successful in life.
Yeah, absolutely, because it touches every corner of our state. And you mentioned briefly earlier the pandemic. That change has been so enormous in every aspect of life, but this is another way the mental health need has gone through the roof during the last 18 months or so of the pandemic. What have you seen from your perspective of how the pandemic has shifted almost from a physical pandemic to a mental, emotional, spiritual pandemic?
Well, and I shared with you that when I travel the state and I talk to anyone that deals with young people, they will share, and not just share their anecdotal stories, but they'll share statistics and they'll share numbers that they're taking, from their surveys that they're doing with their young people. So we're seeing it. I mean, we're seeing that there is a direct correlation between the pandemic and how it has affected people in Indiana. Young people, old people, everyone in between. And for those of us who don't face those challenges, we all faced a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of angst during COVID. So you put that on top and you take people and remove their normal services and the normal way they receive those services from them, and you're just adding to that, you're just adding to that burden that they already have in terms of trying to get the help that they need and the support. So it has definitely had an effect, and it is an effect that we want to see not carry forward into future generations. Let's get our arms around it now. Let's all work together. Let's figure out how we can do this, and then let's make it better for the future.
A lofty goal. Suzanne Crouch is joining us here tonight on Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. We're going to take a quick break. She has agreed to stay with us and continue the conversation. We'll be right back.
Shepherd works with both the first and second generation to break the cycle of poverty. It's a two-gen approach to say we want to help the parents and the students to help them have the tools for them to break the cycle of poverty.
You know, it's easy to think programs make a difference, but we know from 35 years of experience, relationships is effective.
In this world, we don't need more programs. We need to know that more people care for us.
Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Indiana's Lieutenant Governor, Suzanne Crouch. Suzanne, thank you so much for giving us your valuable time tonight to talk about this important topic. The next thing I want to ask you about is stigma. We hear that word attached to mental health services so many times. So many people don't address what they need to address because of the stigma. As you travel the state and meet Hoosiers from all over Indiana, are you seeing that the stigma is there still, or is it getting better? How are we doing at addressing the stigma of working on mental health?
It's still there, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why the Colts have kicked the Stigma campaign, where they are highlighting mental health and stigma, and their players are talking about how they've struggled with depression and how they are embracing the challenge of, dealing with that. And that is extremely important, and we have to capitalize upon that investment and that profile that the Colts are putting on and the attention they're putting on the stigma, because it's still out there. And I hear from people all the time that, their son ended up committing suicide, or their daughter, and they were afraid to let anybody know that they had problems. And so I think the more we talk about it, kudos to you. Thank you for having this series where you're actually having that conversation, because the more we talk, the more we remove the stigma. And I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, how critical is it to have a partner like the Colts? You probably don't get more high profile, more visible in the state of Indiana than the Colts. To have them partnering, to have these public facing entities to address the issues has got to be just vital to pushing things forward and to moving the needle.
Absolutely. And in my conversations with companies and corporations, they are hungry to be a part of helping us address this situation. So having an organization like the Colts, as that high profile of an organization, step up and say, this is something we all need to talk about and we need to address, and we're all in, just ends up setting the bar high for the rest of us. And it's up to us to be able to continue to carry that ball forward.
Mm-hmm. I like the football analogy on the Colts point. That's a good one. Let's talk about this. I noticed in some of your recent travels, you seem to be purposeful in your connection with minority communities who sometimes I know feel ostracized, who deal with the exact same issues everyone else does, and yet maybe sometimes they feel left behind. Their issues aren't addressed in the same way. Why have you been so purposeful in making those connections?
Because quite honestly, they have, there's a greater incidence of suicide, there's a greater incidence of mental health among those communities where they don't have perhaps the acceptance or the resources to be able to get the support that they need. And there is a program that involves barbers, African American barbers throughout the country, and we have some here in Indiana. There's one in the Fort Wayne area, Trey Cato. I went up and visited him at his barber shop, and he actually, through this program, is trained and is given information and support on mental health and the services that are out there. And so when he is having those intimate conversations with his clientele and they're sitting in his barber chair, he has the opportunity to talk to them, and if they express an interest or a desire to seek help, he has the resources to be able to help them. A very powerful program. And so it's those kinds of programs that we need to continue to support and grow throughout Indiana so that everyone gets that opportunity to be able to seek help.
I think that's an important lesson for all of us. The more we can openly discuss these things, the more we normalize this conversation, the more we make it part of our everyday lives, and maybe that gets the stigma to go away, and maybe that helps people have the courage, have the boldness to get the help they need to get.
And you know, the thing that is so interesting is when I talk about my own personal experience, I'm at a Rotary or a chamber or any organization and I talk about it, every time there are multiple people that come up and say, thank you for saying that. I had a son, I had a daughter, I have a son, I have a daughter, I have a parent. We all know someone.
Right.
And so I think you're absolutely right. The more we can do these kinds of conversations, and again, thank you for providing this kind of forum where we can talk about it honestly and openly, and then it becomes easier for other people to talk about it.
The last topic I want to ask you about is technology. We have seen such incredible leaps and bounds in the world of technology. When you and I were growing up, we didn't walk around with cell phones as kids. We weren't connected to the rest of the world all the time, 24/7. And there's a good side and a bad side to that. In the area of mental health especially, but in all walks of life, as you go around the state and connect with Hoosiers, how has technology helped and how has it hurt us, do you think, as a society?
Well, I think it has helped us, for instance, during COVID, when people weren't able to go to their therapists, able to go to their psychiatrists, able to go to their doctors, telehealth became very, very critical. And all of a sudden, we learned that there are people that actually do better when they have telehealth and they don't have to get in a car, find transportation, go to an office in a strange environment to talk about their issues, that they can do it within the comfort of their home, they can do it telehealth. So we learned that that is extremely important, but that's why being connected is extremely important. And we've invested $270 million in addition to 80 more to be able to connect Hoosiers throughout Indiana, so a total of $350 million.
Wow.
With broadband expansion, because we can have telehealth, but if people aren't connected, they can't take that advantage of that. And that's the good part, is the technology is allowing us to get more services to people. And of course, we all know, all the bad things that can happen with young people and people that are, unsuspecting on the internet. And those are the things we're going to have to continue to fight and challenge. But the glass is always half full for me, so I tend to focus on the good that technology can do for people, and we saw during COVID that telehealth is able to provide people with some services that otherwise they may not have been comfortable getting.
Suzanne, we appreciate that mentality and that attitude, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Only our third episode of Restoring Hope, and it's been an absolute treat to have you here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for what you're doing.
Absolutely. It has been a treat to sit down with our Lieutenant Governor about the role of hope in her life and how she's looking to help extend that to Hoosiers. Hope is one of the overarching themes of our show and of Crosswinds Counseling in general. Each week here on Restoring Hope, we invite one of our executives to talk about the importance of that very concept. Tonight, Abe Hepler, the director of part of Crosswinds Counseling, one of our executives there, he talks about the need for hope through challenges in life, and he reminds us that our one true hope is found in the one who will return.
Hi, I'm Abe Hepler. In the beginning of the scriptures, at the very beginning of the Bible, we find the story of God creating the universe. And in Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, we find these words. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was without form and empty. Darkness was on the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Now this word deep was a really interesting word in the Hebrew language that this poem was written in. The word deep is actually the Hebrew word chaos. At the beginning of the Bible, at the beginning of all things, we find God sitting present in the middle of chaos. But God doesn't leave the universe there. In fact, over the rest of Genesis chapter 1, we watch as God brings order to the chaos he was living in. God literally creates order in the universe. Now, I think this is incredibly important for us. I think it's an important idea for us to understand, because if your life is anything like mine, you may have places that feel chaotic. Maybe it's a mess on the kitchen counter. Maybe it's your bedroom closet. Maybe it's the chaos that's being created for us emotionally by our relationships. But we are to imitate God. We're to do what God did, and God steps into chaos and creates order. Tucked into this ancient Jewish religious poem, we find that we as people have a God-given responsibility to bring order to the places we find chaos. And the reason this is so important is because as we create order, hope gets born. As we step into the places in our lives that have chaos, that are chaotic, as we fix those things, we discover hope.
Welcome back. I'm Curtis Smith. Thanks for staying with us tonight. In our counseling corner, Sarah Visley of Crosswinds Counseling talks about one of the most common themes our counselors work through: anxiety. In fact, it is one of the most common challenges we all face. No one goes through this life without being anxious. Jesus told us that we will have problems in this world, but we can take comfort in the fact that he has overcome the world. Even with that knowledge, there are times when getting help is the best thing we can do. Sarah tells us that working through anxiety is important, and she discusses what it looks like with a Crosswinds counselor.
Hi, my name is Sarah Visley. I am a therapist here at Crosswinds Counseling, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about anxiety. Anxiety nowadays is very, very, very much present in our world. And so what I like to do with my clients when they come in to talk to me about their anxiety is I like to break down those anxious thoughts, where we dabble into a little bit of the past and we dabble a little bit into the future, but we're not focusing on either one, because when we focus on the past, we become very depressed because you can't change it. And focusing on too much in the future, that becomes very anxious because you don't even know what's coming. And so just staying in the here and now, where they can take those thoughts captive, past or future, and really tear them apart to see what is kind of affecting them or what is making them anxious. And just having space in counseling so where they can talk about those thoughts. Some studies have talked about how the human mind has over 30,000 thoughts in a 16-hour day. And that to me is just insane to even think about, but it's very, very real if you really stop and try to think about it. So when taking those thoughts captive, why it's so important is because we can have a thought that becomes very rooted, and then what happens is you kind of spiral out of control with that thought if you don't take it captive. And you then start to look at your life in that lens. And so it's very important to make sure that we're taking in really good information, taking in positive information that is giving us life instead of tearing us down or making us compare ourselves to others around us, And so with my clients, I just like to build up their self-esteem, have them find some confidence in themselves, and taking those thoughts captive and feeling confident about how to do, self-care and how to do different techniques with anxiety to feel confident to go out after we're done in counseling and be able to attack whatever comes in their way. And so I just want to encourage you, if you are feeling anxious, do not be embarrassed of coming to counseling. It is a very scary thing. Even as a therapist, it took me a lot to say that I needed therapy in my own training, but I was so happy that I did, because it completely changed my life. And I can't take my clients further than what I will go myself. And so, when you're thinking about yourself and you want to be the better self, you got to kind of do the hard work, which is being vulnerable in counseling, but also having that space where you can just be real and messy and not care what the person is thinking, and just getting that help and that space to be you and be raw is so, so, so life-changing. And so I just encourage you, if you're feeling anxious, to reach out to a therapist and get on your journey to healing.
Tonight, we've heard about the importance of counseling and the tremendous need for it across our great state. The truth is, the need for mental health services has never been higher. And as you would imagine, the need for mental health providers is equally high. If you're a counselor, therapist, or mental health provider and you would like to pursue a career with Crosswinds Counseling, we're looking for great men and women to invest into the lives of other people. If you would like to join the Crosswinds Counseling family, you can visit the website that you see on your screen right now, crosswindscounseling.org/careers, to see the career opportunities at Crosswinds. If you know of people who are looking to work in this field, please let them know about Crosswinds Counseling. Right now, we need more people to join us in this impactful work of bringing hope to people than ever before. We'll be right back after this short message from our partners.
In the heart of downtown Indy, at the corner of Pennsylvania and Maryland Streets, it's Prime 47, the city's only independent, locally owned and operated steakhouse, offering gourmet dishes, the highest quality steaks, fresh seafood, and an extensive wine list. Prime 47 specializes in large parties and events. So, whether it's dinner for 2 or 200, it's prime time you visit Prime 47, Indy's Steakhouse, for the finest in dining.
Thank you for joining us tonight for Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. We'll be right back here next Thursday at 9:30. We'll introduce you to 2 organizations that we partner with, 2 that might actually surprise you as they dive into the world of mental health and the needs there. Have a great night. Be blessed. We'll see you next Thursday at 9:30.